Welcome to Basically Sci-Fi, the short story podcast with stories you can basically call sci-fi. I'm Adam.
I'm Jared.
And I'm Todd.
And good morning, everybody. Good morning, good night.
Yeah.
In case I don't see you.
So, who's ready to hear a story today?
I am ready to hear a story.
Very good.
Just putting that out there in case anyone's got one laying around.
Oh, let me have a look around. I think I have a long Word document that I can send you.
What, you have a story?
I do. It's my turn to write a story this week.
Dude,
I hope you're ready for some epic fiction. It's not epic fantasy, because
no,
I don't write fantasy. I write hard science fiction. Allegedly.
Science fiction.
Throbbing science fiction.
We brought you in as
erections.
The hard science expert.
It's a callback to my first story that we ever recorded together that was all just hard throbbing buildings.
That was...
Yeah.
It's a deep cut.
Me laughing at things that weren't jokes. Instantly regretting it.
This week, with how many years has it been since that day? God.
Since that day?
Since then? Like 5, I don't know.
Couldn't have been more than 2.
Time.
Couldn't have been more than 2.
Well, I'm happy to announce that I've finally learned how to write a joke, and this week I have a joke for you.
I'm excited about that.
Without further ado, if you don't mind, I'm going to get right into it.
All right, get up in the guts of that story.
Here we go. Okay. Buck sat in the captain's chair, sweat matting the hair around his fingers as he held the flight sticks with a death grip. He'd played many Vidya games in his time, but he'd never actually piloted a real ship. In fact, he'd never even been behind the wheel of any vehicle. But all the Galactic Net videos he'd binged after Ripper let him on board Raptor number 39 had said that flying was just like riding a bike. Not that he'd ever done that either. A small, pudgy yellow hand flitted into his peripheral vision. A smooth mix of synth and drums played over the ship's cockpit speakers. Freddy was in the co-pilot seat, lip-syncing to Lady in Red. He put a hand on Buck's. Buck felt a mixture of comfort and terror. Comfort mostly from the synth, and the terror partly from the task ahead of him, and partly from Freddy's massive mouth and the lack of lips and eyelids, and those teeth. A shiver ran down his spine, and he snapped out of his funk.
I forgot he's a Freckian.
He's a Freckian, and he ain't got no freckin' eyelids. A shiver ran down his spine, and he snapped out of his funk. He turned around to address the crew that had volunteered to come with him. "My boys." No, that's not what he sounds like. "My boys, froggy and otherwise," he said, turning the music down a little. "Thank you for being here. I honestly have no idea what I'm doing," he said, feeling the weight come off his shoulders. Or was that Freddy? "Freddy, that's not helping. Anywho, we're all going to be... Anywho, we're all gonna be blasting off into the unknown, and if we all die, let our ghosts haunt those damn Ruskies," he said. There was no applause, just grim silence. Freddy settled into his chair and powered the ship up. Freddy carefully guided the ship out of the docking bay of the Dirk Gently, and into and out of the Star Tropics. Once they were in proper void, he let go of the reins. Buck was looking down at the ship's work hours sheet he'd gotten signed by Dirk. It was water-stained, smudged with dirt, and there might have been a little bit of blood on the corner. Or shit, it was hard to tell the difference. He folded it up and put it into his pocket. Yeah, when they're old, and crusty and brown, yeah.
Okay. I could usually tell the difference between mine.
He folded it up and put it into his pocket. He grabbed the flight sticks and pushed them all the way forward. The ship's engine immediately reacted and the crew were thrown back into their chairs. The jump buoy was before him and he was careening towards it. He didn't know how to stop the ship. Literally. He did not know that the green button on the dash turned on inertial dampeners. Freddy knew, but his short yellow arms were just not quite long enough to reach the button. Freddy knew, but his short yellow arms were just not quite long enough to reach the button. Not with being glued to his chair. Buck was aware of screaming. Was he screaming? The buoy was so close now. Buck flew right towards it, and in the moment when he would have collided, the ship disappeared. They slipped through space. That was the best way that Buck could put it. The ship was in a tunnel of lights. Tiny fires streaking past the ship against the oppressive darkness of space. A bright ship was coming for them. Buck jerked on the control stick and just barely missed it, the Raptor beginning to tumble. It felt like it hit a wall and bounced off. The light show stopped and everything went dark, and the galactic seat was before them. Freddy slapped the inertial dampener so hard he cracked the plastic. The ship stopped tumbling and began floating forward gently. Alarms blared at the engineer's chair. Mac looked at the screen. "What in the hell is that noise?" Buck tried to be heard over the alarms. "There's a great big spiral on my screen, Buck, and it's all red," Mac said. He tried not to notice the part of the Raptor's hull plating float past his window port. In later rewrites... Oh, you're not supposed to read that.
I don't think so. I was trying to avoid it with my eyes.
Nope, don't read that. That's a note for me if I ever turn this into a book.
Right.
"Well, we ain't dead now, are we?" Buck said.
Is that how that's pronounced?
"Would you look at that? Ripper, give Mac a hand at the engineer's station." Ripper went over to Mac and reached into the compartment under the console and pulled out a fistful of wires. The console went dark and the alarm stopped. "We're all good, Captain." "Perfect. Thanks." The devastation of the capital's multi-tiered planetary shell floated through the orbit of the planet. Going any closer would be asking to get hit with space debris, and this wasn't the Star Tropics. No one was here to take your asteroid tax. Cities on the dark side of the planet were devoid of their usual light. Wrecked spaceships drifted like bodies caught in a sinking cruise liner's undertow. Buck and Freddy worked to right the ship's position and turned it back towards the jump buoys. Mac, Arlo, and Ripper took in the devastation through the window. "Why is this happening?" Mac asked. "Twent," Freddy said. "Look at all those drones scavenging metals." "Yeah, the company. Fuck the company."
Yeah.
"Look at all those drones scavenging metals and mechanical parts and polymers. Look at them. They're like flies all over our corpse." "But Twent is the biggest company in the galaxy. Why would they be helping the Ruskies?" Buck said. "I don't know if they're helping them, but it's obvious they're somehow involved. If it were possible to avoid their products, I definitely would." "Yeah, but you can't really buy anything without involving Twent." "Twent has the largest fleet of private ships and more resources than some of the galactic protectorates. If they were here earlier, well, I don't know what would have happened, but it could have been different," Ripper said. "Gentlemen, and Kronk." "Yes, Captain," Kronk said, interrupting Buck and totally killing the flow of his thoughts. Buck was actually happy.
Dressed specifically.
Oh, he was dressed specifically, so that is Buck's fault.
Yeah.
Buck was actually happy for the first time in what felt like forever. And he felt satisfied. Captain. This Raptor was his now. How long had it been since he'd crashed on the froggy planet and had to stand in the rain, and how long exactly had he been wearing the same pair of underwear? Not that he usually made a point of changing it daily, but still, this pair could probably stand up on its own by now. Oh, Buck floundered. But the old hot dog man spoke up.
He's still there?
Yeah, he's still there. He volunteered to go with them. "Let's get them Ruskies, yeah. I've got to see my kid on Friday, and I only get visitation once a month, so let's keep this quick." "Right. Punch it, Freddy," Buck said. And Freddy punched it. They piloted the ship to the far side of the galactic seat and started on the long series of jumps that Buck had outlined in his fever dream. All in all, it took them several hours to make the connections. At last, they exited jump space and found an icy planet orbiting a pitiful little red star. The hot dog man gasped. A tear came to his eye. "It's the Gremlin! To think I'd get to see it with me own 2 eyes." Buck noted the 3 other planets in the system, which were much closer to the star and an odd pinkish-beige color. "Scanning for life signs," Ripper said, turning some dials. A long sheet of paper was spit out of the console he was sitting at. He unzipped the eye holes in his spike suit to get a better look, and he held it up to his eyes.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, he's a gimp.
Yeah.
"You're not going to believe this, but I'm picking up 144.1 million people down there. And there's a whole lot of drones flying back and forth from the planet to something orbiting on its far side." At Buck's direction, they engaged thrusters, just enough to drift over to the far side of the planet. A great gray round shape came into view as they rounded the planet. It was perfectly smooth as a planetary body could be. Usually, Buck knew this to be true, shit in space gets hit by other shit out in space. That makes craters. Also, tectonics generate all kinds of texture. "It's so smooth," Kronk said. Like it was concrete poured into a giant wooden mold." "Concrete in space? Ridiculous! It would be full of tiny little holes," Buck said. "It is concrete," Ripper said, squinting at another long, thin piece of paper. "Primarily concrete and wood to be precise." Buck looked on in awe at it. It was the size of a moon. It had a great big red star painted on the side. "Oh yes, a classic feature of the Ruskies. Every ruin that I've seen was always made of concrete," the old man chimed in. As they came closer, another big shape drifted into view. It was a Continent-class ship, mangled with a huge tear in its side and debris drifting out from the gash. Twent was scrawled on the side of the ship in great big orange letters. Look, drones are going from that one green spot on the planet to the space ball. Space ball, Buck said. We gotta get in that space ball. Buck, are you listening? He wasn't. Buck grabbed the controls and brought the ship around in a real mediocre fashion over to where the drones were flying to. Buck really wanted to get in that ball, but the others wanted to investigate the aforementioned green spot, and after much debate, it was decided that Buck could check out the ball himself, while the others went down to the planet and did some investigating. The gang would meet back up later with Buck and prepare a course of action. Buck went to the back of the ship, geared up into his spacesuit, and stepped out into the airlock. The door opened into the void of space, and he pushed off and drifted. He took one look back at his ship. Buck's Duck, he named it right there and then. Then he engaged the thrusters in his life support pack, and as he passed into the delivery bay and came to land. The mostly artificial gravity here was much better than the kind he got on smaller ships, and it made his stomach feel much at ease compared to the Buck's Duck, which I'm sure I won't fuck up saying later. Now, inside the Buck. No.
What?
Well, hang on.
The duck?
No, not the duck. The ball, the space ball.
Oh,
Why did I write
okay.
now inside the Buck? Now inside the ball, Buck could see that it was really made of wood and concrete. How very well, he was going to say practical, but that didn't really fit. Utilitarian? Depressing? Amid the shades of gray and brown that made up the busy hangar, Buck saw a great conveyor belt, where the never-ending stream of drones set down barrels. He went over to the conveyor and with great effort was able to drag 2 barrels off of the belt, with one with a big red B on the side, and another with a big yellow P. Tipping it onto its side, he tried to get leverage to pry it open and found it much easier than he expected. The lid came off, and about 100 gallons of red liquid spilled out onto the ground. Buck reached down and put his finger in it and gave it a taste. Blood.
Why is he doing any of this?
Because he's Buck.
Okay.
Blood, it was blood.
Always taste your mysterious liquids.
Yeah.
There's about 50... The world is 50-50 liquids you can taste and liquids you can't. The ones you can't, they'll just kill you, but the other 50 is basically safe. It was blood. That's what the B was for, he guessed. On to the P. There's a few things that could be, and he wasn't particularly excited for either of them, but this was good old-fashioned science now. Not wanting a huge spill of some unknown pee on the ground, he opened this one upright. Inside was a viscous yellow fluid that smelled like butter. He carefully gave it a taste. It was platelets! Blood and platelets!
Platelets?
Yeah, platelets. You know what platelets are, right?
No.
Alright, so in your blood you have white blood cells, you have red blood cells, and you have platelets. When you go to the doctor, and they test your blood for things, they put the blood in a container and they spin it around real quick, and then the blood separates, right? You get the blood, and then you get the lighter platelets, which are kind of like an oil that will, if you get a cut, it'll gum up the cut so that you don't bleed everywhere. But basically, it's some good shit. There's been a lot of science recently where they replaced the platelets in lab rats with blood and platelets from younger lab rats to...
And it tastes good, too?
I have no idea what it tastes like, but apparently, Buck knows.
Yeah.
So, guys, you're never gonna believe this, Buck said over the voice chat to the group. He filled them in on what he'd found. Mac was disgusted that Buck would just lick any old liquid he found. The rest of the gang was down on the planet. They told Buck that the whole thing was covered in a mile-high sheet of ice, except for the spot of green seen from space. It was a hole in the ice with a glowing red shaft of iron as tall as the tallest building on Mac's Earth. It thawed a hole in the sheet and revealed grass and a network of tunnels leading off into the ice. We're going to take a look down some of these tunnels, Buck. Those drones are endlessly coming and going from them. If they're carrying blood and platelets like you say, then I shudder to imagine what we'll find down there, Ripper said. Buck couldn't agree more. We've got to do this for Dirk, he said. They appointed a time in the next hour to call back and update each other, then ended the call. Buck hopped onto the conveyor to get to the heart of this. It was a long ride, long enough for Buck to get Ripper's call while riding. They'd found huge banks of Ruskies, all in suspended animation, frozen in the ice. There were great processing stations where their blood was collected, separated, and sent off to the great concrete ball in the sky. Buck continued waiting, between barrels of B and P, for another hour or so, until the conveyor's track finally connected to a larger room. It was a massive cavern, big enough to fit an asteroid into. Near the top there was something shiny. Near the middle there was some kind of big pink ball. It had a featureless skin beneath which something seemed to be writhing. The ball looked nasty, so Buck decided to investigate the shiny thing first. Save the worst for last, my mom always said. His mom always said. Because if you're lucky, you'll never get around to it. He engaged the thrusters in his life support pack and took off towards the shiny thing at the top of the cavern. Getting closer, he could see great tubes leading up to it and going into the ball. At last he was upon it, and he saw it was a great ball of space glass, with a platform before it, and thousands of tubes leading up and into it. At its center he could see a throne of gold. Landing on the platform, Buck crept up close to the glass and squinted as hard as he could to see what was inside. If only he'd gotten corrective lenses.
Who was thinking that? The narrator?
The narrator, because Buck never wore his lenses and he never felt bad about it. There was a shriveled raisin of a man on the throne with thousands of tubes and pipes sprouting from his back and a dusty blonde comb-over covering his liver-spotted head. "Who are you to come and interrupt my work?" It called out in a voice like rubbing newspaper together. It was amplified and carried through speakers to the outside of the space glass and to Buck. "Hail and well met, Mr. Pickled Raisin. I'm Buck Peters, and I'm here to stop you, I think." "Insolent garbage! How dare you! I'm Gruten, the scion of the Glavs, and the president of the Gremlin. My reign has no term limit." "Well, I've never heard of you. It seems to me like the rest of the galaxy has gone and forgotten you. Oh, why did I write that? I only turned up now because you sent a giant naked dude to try and smash me and everyone else on the star tropics. Give back what you stole, child, and I'll send the colossi back to sleep," the prune said.
This president knows who Buck is?
Yeah, Buck just said his name.
Oh, and he was aware of who Buck was before that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
"Buck Peters doesn't negotiate with tyrants," he said, very American of him.
Uh-huh.
"I'm no tyrant, child. I hold free and fair elections. Every 4 years. There's only ever one vote, and it's always me, but I know it's what my people would want. I have my finger on the pulse of the people, you could say," Gruten said. "More like you got your fingers round the throat of your people," Buck said. Buck drew on him and fired his laser. It bounced off the space glass that separated them. Gruten cackled. "You can't just shoot things you don't like. That doesn't make them go away. I will get back what was taken, and my people will spread out all over the galaxy once again. You can't stop me, little hairy man." Buck looked around for something he could break the glass with, but there was nothing. No stalactites or stalagmites, no convenient computers or no hammers, no magnetic rocks. Buck was at a loss. If he couldn't shoot it, he didn't know what to do. He looked down at the pink thing and figured it was at least worth a shot taking a look at. He leapt off the platform, Gruten's dusty laughter taunting him. After a good bit of freefall, he cushioned the landing with his thrusters and took a second to write Arlo a note. This story was going to make him rich when he publishes it in his memoirs. Then, Buck could have all the ships he could ever pilot. And he wouldn't need a real job, he thought to himself. He'll just become a writer. Buck sent Arlo the message and then moved closer to the weird pink ball. As he got closer to it, he could see it was covered in runes, very much like the ones from the beast's power core. There was a machine pressed up to one side of the 100-meter tall ball. Getting closer, Buck found a hole cut into the side of the ball with a box on rails leading into the hole. Computers flanked this hole, and there seemed to be a set of numbers counting down. Buck came to the box and saw there was a window in it, and under the glass was a frozen Ruski, suspended in sleep, wearing an old green military uniform with many medals upon its breast. Far too many medals, to be honest. You could always tell which ones were real medals and which ones were just ego fluffers. A bell chimed and the box started moving slowly towards the hole on its rails. Without thinking, Buck pulled open the box and pulled out the frozen dude. He dumped him onto the ground and climbed into the box. Buck got colder and then drifted away into sleep.
What?
He jumped into a cryo box.
Oh, okay.
The box passed through the hole and it closed up. The pink skin ruptured like a zit, and a nasty, massive baby unfolded from the carnage. It squealed and screamed and clawed at the walls of the cavern. At last it put its pudgy hands up to the tubing leading up to the shiny ball far off above it and gave a hard tug. Concrete could be heard shearing, and the ball came crashing down. Arlo got a message from Buck as him and the gang were getting ready to load up the ship, and he looked up at the concrete ball in the sky. A boom like they'd never heard before ripped through the air as the ball was rent into pieces. Arlo looked back at the message Buck had sent and shed a single tear. The end. Buck dies at the end.
Oh, no! Potentially, I guess.
Yep.
But he's planning on making money with his memoirs and becoming a writer, which is just an easy way of not needing a job.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't think this is the end for old Buck. I think he's gonna come out of that giant womb just fine.
Oh yeah, well, we got one more episode in this before I'm done with it.
Oh yeah.
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 Excellent. Well then that's not the end.
Yeah.
It's like the cryopod's like that refrigerator from the Indiana Jones movie. You just climb in it and you can survive a nuclear explosion.
I was getting Indiana Jones vibes from this episode real bad too. Like
Really?
there was a mine cart that he got in, and I don't know, just very focused on one hero kind of exploring into dangerous territory. It was very Indiana Jonesy. I liked it.
Thank you. I've never seen that movie.
Ah, well, I only saw it recently because someone forced me to.
That's the only way to watch good movies. But yeah, I felt like I did a lot of trying to figure out exactly how to deal with the Ruskies, considering, well, I don't think I have to be any more obvious. I don't know if, like, I was too subtle. I don't know if you got what I was going for.
What the Ruskies could be a parallel
It
for?
certainly
Yeah,
wasn't
the Ruskies,
too subtle.
the Gremlin and the
No.
and Gruten.
Gruten and the Gremlin,
Uh,
and how Americans are suddenly all up in an outroar over something that we've done for the last 20 years.
and if I can't just shoot it, I don't know what to do as far as policy dealing with potential
Exactly.
Ruskies.
Yeah, I want to avoid making political statements on our fun fantasy podcast.
Right.
Sorry, this one's the science
Which
fiction
is why I'm
podcast.
glad there's no Ruskies. And
You kind of wrote an entire episode making a political statement, though, so that ship's sailed, my friend.
Yeah, I kind of.
well,
I kind of wrote myself into a
buy
corner.
from giant corporations. And,
I kind of wrote myself into a corner a little bit, making the Ruskies the villain of my story, like a long time ago.
That's a joke.
Yeah.
It's a joke. I mean, because the Ruskies are kind of a joke,
Yeah.
but now they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, turns out.
Yep.
I'm not watching news anymore. What the Ruskies do.
Oh well, not much. You know.
Invaded Ukraine.
Okay, I had heard of that.
Fascism is a snake that eats its own tail. That's why I had Gruten survive on the blood and platelets of his people, frozen.
Oh, is that okay? I think, and I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't do this because Jared doesn't like when we guess at his episodes. But I was thinking that all the blood and pee was for making giants. What do you call it?
It's for keeping him alive. It's for keeping
him alive.
Gruten alive. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right?
He's an emperor.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
I did got a little inspiration from the Warhammer 40K Emperor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A little.
Just a little.
Oh, okay. Originally, I thought it was going to be making more giant naked dudes, and he got into that ball at the end and turned into an Attack on Titan, and used it to destroy Gruten.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you can't shoot
I
it,
didn't think he
punch it.
died. I think he's just in a giant naked blood baby.
Delicious. I love your... I love your terminology. But yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say
And,
anything more about what's happening after this point in the story, but I will explain anything you have questions for about this point in time prior to this point in time.
Not a question. I was just appreciating the characterization of Buck. I thought it was an interesting choice to have the narrator following him alone while the group kind of filled him in on things that were happening that made the story feel a lot punchier, right? They just let him know what was going on with the planet, with the ice. So I thought that was really expedient way to handle that.
Thank you.
And I liked how Buck, just as I was thinking that he reminded me of his mother, I was thinking the way he just kind of has a knack for knowing which things are tasteable was very similar to his mother's ability to just kind of know which planets had breathable air. Like they've got that adventurous spirit that would get lesser people killed, you know.
Less luckier people killed, yes.
Yeah. So I thought that was cool.
The thing about luck is it always runs out in the end.
Well, not for Buck.
Because he's Buck and he's here to luck.
Lucky Buck.
All right. Then thank you, dear listeners, for following our stories up to this point. And I know things are starting to wrap up, but I hope that you will await our future episodes with bated breath.
Do that. Do lots of bait.
Checkbooks in hand for our new project. And as always, don't forget to like, comment, and comment, and sprout tomatoes in your garden. And join the Discord.
Yeah, do that.
See you.
Sure.
Later.
Bye.